Good to see everyone here. You have been sent the minutes from the May 2nd meeting. We need a motion to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So moved. Secretary has a meeting. She will be coming back with us to join us a little later on this morning for the departmental update. So we're going to move right into our presentations this morning. We're going to be talking about resilient food systems. Our first presentation will be on the USDA Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program. We have Tricia Kovacs, the USDA Ag Marketing Service. Tricia is the Deputy Administrator of USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service Transportation and Marketing Program. Tricia was appointed in 2016 to her current position. Getting ahead of myself here. With the market, Tricia has been the Deputy Administrator at USDA's Ag Marketing Service Transportation and Marketing Program. Tricia joined USDA Ag's Marketing Service in 2016 and was appointed to her current position in, I think it looks like 2020. I may be mistaken. The Transportation Marketing Service supports local and regional food systems with the goal of expanding markets for farmers and increasing consumer access to healthy foods. Through applied research, technical assistance services, and grant support, they help small and mid-sized producers identify and access marketing opportunities. Prior to the USDA, Tricia directed regional market programs at the Washington State Department of Agriculture, where she oversaw the founding of the Farm to School program and led the Small Farm Direct Marketing program. So welcome, good to have you with us.
It's great to be here. I'm not sure what the audience is seeing. I think that it is me now, but I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the slides I prepared. I will give you warning, there are many words on some of these pages. That's because this is the one that we post on our website so that people can have the overview. I will be able to send it afterwards, and it looks like my screen sharing is not allowed right now. It was in our practice, but it's not currently letting me share that PowerPoint.
Yeah, Josh will take care of that right now.
Right, Josh?
Yeah.
If not, that's okay. I'll still use them as talking points.
Try that again, Tricia. It should be working.
All right, I will try again. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, let me know when you can see that.
Yes.
We've got you. Yep.
Okay, so, we have a lot of local and regional food programs. This one is called Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program, and I want to provide an overview for you. I'm going to move straight into it. So this program is run through cooperative agreements with the states and is intended to serve that middle of the supply chain need. So everything post-harvest, post-farm, up till it gets to people's plates. So, and it's for locally and regionally produced food products. That includes specialty crops, so fruits and vegetables, nuts, all of that, dairy, grains for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. So as you can see, it's designed to support food systems, crops, and products that are for human consumption. You don't see meat and poultry here because we have a number of programs at USDA that serve meat and poultry processing in the middle of the supply chain. So those are funded through other programs. In this program, we've entered into cooperative agreements with the states, and each state or territory will plan, propose, and make subawards in the form of infrastructure grants to businesses doing that middle of the supply chain activity, processing, aggregation, distribution activities. And that's to create better market options for the farmers and ranchers in your state and to create opportunities in communities, economic opportunities, allowing them to keep more of their food supply chain dollar. So states are, the main function is those infrastructure grants, and states are also able to take some funds for state-led complementary supply chain coordination activities. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So just to be really clear, it is most food products, most agricultural products. It does not include, this is the easiest way to think about it and to define it. It does not include funding for meat and poultry, wild caught seafood, exclusively animal feed and forage products, fiber, landscaping products, tobacco, or dietary supplements. So really you can see a wide swath of our food system and agriculture are served by this program. So the states have a number of responsibilities here, and they are our key partner in this. We're very much looking forward to these partnerships. And I will go over each of these, but the first step is a state plan. And the second step, actually, these are kind of enmeshed steps, outreach and state plan. Today is a little bit part of the outreach and planning for this. Administration of infrastructure grants, which I've discussed, and state-led supply chain activities. And that is optional, and states can take up to 20% or up to $1 million of their award to do those activities. So looking at the state plan, our expectation, and we are very excited to see these state plans, is that the outreach plan will be described in the state plan, and a description of any early outreach, and this is very important, any early outreach that the state is conducting to inform that state plan itself. So this really says to us, this is how our state is going to run this program. These are the priorities and needs that we see in our state, and how we're going to structure this activity to accordingly. How is the state going to run their infrastructure grant competition, so their RFA and application review in the state? And then if the state is planning to use a portion of their funds for state-led supply chain coordination, how will they do that? So each of these gets a minute, and I'll go fairly quickly here. But that outreach really should be a transparent process, receiving and considering public comment in various ways to identify priorities for the program in your state. And then also must include underserved farmers and ranchers, new and beginning farmers and ranchers, veteran producers, farm and food businesses in the supply chains for the foods we're discussing in this program, and underserved communities in the state. We really want to make sure that these programs are serving those who need it most and who may need access to better markets. The supply chain coordination is, this is about, oh, this slide has actually got the wrong header on it, but I guess it's sort of an overview slide. Sorry, I did look at these, but not today. States will administer a competitive process, as we've talked about, and they can use 20% or up to $1 million for that state-led supply chain coordination and technical assistance work. So let's go into the infrastructure grants briefly. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but these grants will fund projects that expand capacity and infrastructure for aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transportation, wholesaling, or distribution of targeted agricultural products. So as you can see, it's pretty wide open for those middle of the supply chain activities that will create more and better markets for producers. The minimum infrastructure grant award is $100,000, but an award could go up to $3 million if there are projects that warrant that funding that will make a significant difference in the state. Eligible entities, these are long, and that's because, as you can see, all of these are about, are they operating that middle of the supply chain activity? So it might be agricultural producers or groups of producers, it might be processors, it might be nonprofit organizations who are doing these kinds of activities to aggregate, distribute, or process products. It might be local governments or tribal governments, and it might even be institutions like schools or universities who are doing that middle of supply chain work. So if you think about in farm to school, they may be working with a number of producers across the school district. And what they really need is some equipment in that school district that allows them to purchase that product and make sure that it is a feasible process to get that onto students' plates. All applicants, or all awardees, I should say, must be domestically owned, and the facilities must be physically located within the United States and territories. It is assumed that they will be within your state. So the priorities for these, we do expect that the state considers how to make sure that this program serves the underserved producers listed here. And that these are definitions based on our Farm Service Agency definitions for underserved. But also we wanted to make sure that for processors and other middle of the supply chain businesses who are not farmers and ranchers, that they are fall under small business administration. And there's a definition of that. It's in our requests for applications, or it's in our scope document that the state has. But it's essentially small, women-owned, disadvantaged individual-owned, veteran-owned businesses. There is a cost share here for those sub awards. We're investing into businesses here in a lot of cases. And so the cost share is 50% of the total proposed cost, but we are offering a reduced match of the total proposed cost for those underserved businesses that I described in the last slide and are described here as well. We ask that the states have a competitive review process. I don't think we probably need to go through all of this, but it needs to have independent panel reviews, qualified individuals, and making sure that there is not conflict of interest. These are simply making sure whether the applicant, these are the criteria kind of, that they need to demonstrate financial viability, technical feasibility and readiness, market impact and opportunities, and demonstrate community impact and support, including labor and workforce considerations. So then the state will submit those, similar to how it works in the specialty crop block grant, where the state submits their proposed package of awards. And that happens later in the process for this program, whereas in specialty crop, the application includes all of that right away. In this case, the state plan is how we're going to do this. And then there is an infrastructure grant proposal that comes later in the process. This is a very long slide. Essentially, this is a list of things that could be examples of infrastructure grant activities. You'll see that there are a wide range of things that can happen around equipment or purchasing of things, or upgrading, increasing storage space, even constructing new facilities if the state chooses to do that, and then packaging and labeling capacities. So this is what we expect to be funding in this program. Things that we do not fund in this program, it's nice to always have that clear as well, is no land purchases or other real property purchases, no projects focused on meat and poultry processing or other ineligible products. Any activities that have already received a federal award from another federal program to do the same thing, and expenses that will or have been reimbursed under any other program funding. And then that's in there pretty much twice, but it's not that a project can't have had other funding, it's that it can't be funded, duplicate funding for the same thing. So I also want to go over a little bit about how the state can use these funds for state-led supply chain coordination. So the way we're describing this, it is 20% of allocated funding or up to $1 million, whichever is smaller. And it's really designed to serve the supply chains for those products outlined in this RFA. So states are encouraged to conduct this activity themselves. In some ways, it just adds to the capacity of a state to engage in this kind of work, but may contract or enter into sub-agreements to conduct this work. So here's what this means. State-led supply chain coordination activities is a little broad, but what we're really saying here is this is non-financial assistance. These are not grants to the businesses themselves. This is other assistance that the businesses who receive the sub-award grants or other businesses in these supply chains who may need targeted technical assistance or training to help connect the dots in these supply chains, help farmers and ranchers know how to access or be ready to sell to the processors, aggregation, distributors, institutions that you might be prioritizing in your state. So they might be thinking about so the state could be considering overall, what are the supply chain needs and how do we support them? How do we plan for all of these middle of the supply chain activities? It might be that it's webinars, trainings, conferences that are needed to really bring people together, and it might be business assistance directly. So in these, every state we know now is being served by one of USDA's regional food business centers that were also announced a couple of weeks ago. There are 12 of these, and you're hearing about this a little more today here as well. So I won't try to go into it, but we're very happy that you are hearing from both of us today. Our grants division does the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grants. And our local and regional foods division is managing the USDA Regional Food Business Centers program. So our staff are not here to talk about that one today, but you have your local center leads here to talk about it today. So very happy that you're considering all of these at the same time. We do think it's useful to coordinate and work together on these different complementary programs. Also, the state USDA, a different part of USDA AMS is working with you all on local food purchase assistance agreements and local food for school agreements. It's worth thinking about all of these in one big ecosystem, and how does your state want to make use of all these things together in that landscape to serve the best needs for your state's producers and eaters. And then, of course, there are also lots of local and regional producers, federal and state programs, farm to school leads, farm service agency, and others who you may want to consult or engage as well at different parts of the process. So this is another long slide. I don't think we really need to go into it, except to say that we at USDA AMS are very excited about these cooperative agreements and the opportunity to partner in a substantial and meaningful way with states throughout this program. So we've already started office hours where states can come to think about the state plan process and hear from each other, but also ask our staff questions. So we want that consistency, alignment across states, while also allowing states to tailor these to their needs, as you've identified in your work across years, but also in outreach on this specific program. We also have a number of experts and resources on local and regional food systems, market development, value chain coordination, other things that may be useful here. We're happy to work with you on anything that we can share there. And then anything that needs to happen around redirecting or restructuring of funding along the way, as is normal in our grant programs. And we'll also be providing some branding and messaging for this program overall so that it looks the same across the country in a certain way. And we would love to partner on any events, ribbon cuttings, launches, things like that with any of our officials. So, and we'll also be thinking about data collection and making sure that the reporting is supported from our level as well. So that's what I wanted to present, but I definitely want to make sure that we have a few minutes for any questions you have. The website has some of this information here. And then this email address is the best way to reach the team that is working on this. And I work very, very closely with them. So I'll pause there and see what questions you might have for me.
Great, Tricia. This is really, sounds like a fantastic program. I was curious, how soon is this rolling out, or is it already in the process of being rolled out?
So it's already in the process of being rolled out. So it's our grant programs work with that. We put an RFA out first, right? A request for application. In this case, what we did is work directly with the states. We put together a cooperative agreement, and states are signing that cooperative agreement first thing. So we're already engaged. We're already working together. The next step is that in August, which is 90 days essentially from when those agreements were codified, the state would turn in its state plan. Between now and then, conversations like this, conversations out in the field among farmers, ranchers, experts, staff, whoever is the appropriate party to add value to the thinking here. That state plan captures, here's what this state wants to do. So if you think about most programs, there's kind of an application at the beginning. Could think of this as an application, but we put out a document that is sort of the scope and requirements here, terms and conditions, things like that. And then it's up to the state to really think about how do they want to propose to use these funds, including the infrastructure grants, the 20% or up to $1 million if you choose to, and how it's going to meet the needs of the state. So that's August, late August.
And then it's up to the state to determine if they want to spend some of that money, let's say, on technical assistance with filling out the application forms and making sure the applicants really understand the process.
I would consider that part of administering the infrastructure grants program. So
Right.
there's the main cooperative agreement has $1 amount. The state plan will describe what it's going to take in your state to administer that infrastructure grants program well. That includes staffing and materials and all of that. And then I would personally consider that up to 20% a separate activity set that's really about the supply chain support itself and the business support and making connections and ensuring that people can make the most of these grant programs and just add value to your supply chains there in California generally. Is that clear? I think I would put the TA in the first part, the admin costs kind of.
Right. And then there's no means testing for this program?
There is no means testing for this program. There is the match reduction for
For
certain for
underserved,
people who
right.
qualify. Mhm.
Excellent. Sounds good. Glenda, I knew you'd have a question.
Thanks, Tricia. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I've been asked what exactly this program you just described is going to do compared to the food business centers. And I've been answering, and I hope I'm correct, that it's to complement and augment that with a focus on the infrastructure, the equipment, et cetera, that isn't necessarily in the food business, which is really more business support, et cetera. Am I answering that correctly? And how do you see the two really complementing each other as we do prepare that state plan?
Yes, and so I think your description is accurate. I tend to think of, I mean, we have a number of programs that I consider part of this ecosystem, as I've started calling it. The regional food business centers are a bigger region. They're multiple states. We have 12 covering the entire country, including territories. So those are much broader in geographic scope. They also are thinking about coordination of supply chains and markets at that broader scale. They need partners in the state, thinking about it at the state level. What do we have here? Where can we make investments that really support the supply chain at this level and the infrastructure needed to do that? They are doing technical assistance and training as well. So you make sure you want to make sure that you're complementing each other there and taking advantage of what they're doing and vice versa, right? To make sure that you can reach the maximum number of producers with relevant materials at whatever scale you're at. We'll be doing some coordination across the whole country's regional centers as well. It gets complicated, but also hopefully intuitively it will kind of fall into place, kind of who's doing what. They also do have sub-grants. They have capacity builder grants. And those are much smaller grants, and those are to go directly to farm and food businesses. And they can be for equipment and things, but they're not for projects the scale that these can be, where these can go up to $3 million. So these can be pretty big investments. And again, it might be helpful, and you are doing it here today, to coordinate and communicate so that you are providing a complementary service and not a duplicating one. Oh, and I should say, I'm sorry, I will also say that the LAMP grants that USDA, the same team runs those as well. That's Local Food Promotion Program, Farmers Market Promotion Program, and Regional Food Systems Partnership, which sounds very similar in name. But again, that's for smaller regions. That's for sort of grassroots, from the ground up types of projects to convene and think about food systems in a kind of nested scale, a much smaller region than the regional food business centers. Hope that's clear. Some of it's just going to have to fall into place, I think.
No, that's really helpful. And we're fortunate, I don't know about other regions, but our 4-state region does have all 4 state departments of ag as key partners already, so.
That is helpful. That's great. And that is not necessarily true across the country.
Do we have any other questions from the board? No? All right. Josh, could you check online to see if we have any public comment regarding this agenda item?
Yes, if you'd like to make public comment on this agenda item, please use your hand icon and I will unmute your line. We do have a written question that was submitted. Can you speak to whether the state can utilize state dollars for the 50 or 25% match requirements on the infrastructure grants?
That I'm not sure if I have the answer on that one at the tip of my tongue. I'm trying to picture exactly how that would work, because you would need to have, well, state dollars. You can't use the other program funds from here. The question is about state dollars.
Correct.
I don't have a really solid answer on that at the top of my head. I would prefer to go back and talk to the team and look back at our documents to make sure I answer that correctly.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you get a federal grant and you have a state grant to offset, but may not be that case with this program.
I can picture how it would be useful, and I don't know if there is a policy decision on that at this point, so let me take a look. We are holding office hours and things, so the state staff are invited to those, and this is a great question to bring up because I think it's gonna come up in more than one state. So let me take it back and make sure our staff is prepared to answer that one.
And I'm seeing no further questions at this time.
All right. Well, Tricia, you have a great program there. It looks, sounds really effective, and look forward to seeing it rolled out later this year. So thank you for presenting.
We're very much looking forward to partnering with the state.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you joining us today. Great presentation.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Have a great day.
All right, we're going to move to our second presentation today. It's the USDA Regional Food Business Center Southwest. We have Trish Kelly with Valley Vision. Trish Kelly is the Managing Director of Valley Vision, a civic leadership organization dedicated to improving the viability of the Sacramento region. Before coming to Valley Vision, Trish consulted a wide range of clients on economic development, including local jurisdictions, state and federal agencies, educational institutions, councils of government, workforce development boards, and philanthropic entities. She led several flagship initiatives, including state regional partnerships on industry cluster and working development, rural policy, infrastructure, and sustainability indicators, including California's first ever regional-based indicator report for the California Strategic Growth Council. So
I think I need to change that.
think we got it all?
No, too much.
No, Trish, welcome. Good to have
Thank
you here.
Good to see you. Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome to all of us who are embarked in this endeavor together. And it was great to hear the presentation from Tricia, because all of this is dovetailing, and I think what she talked about, the ecosystem, is just a fabulous time and opportunity for us to really bring all these pieces together and transform our food system into the goals and the visions that we have for resiliency and equity and prosperity. So I'm really pleased to be here today, too. I want to, first of all, thank Linda and Secretary Ross for their leadership in coming together to support the process, the application for this grant. And so, Josh, you're going to do the slides. Thank you. So on the next slide, you can see that we all knew, especially when the pandemic hit, the forces that everybody was subjected to. And so we saw the shocks and disruptions to our supply chain and the impact on our farmers and producers and just all of our frontline workers and all throughout the whole supply chain of our food system. So we really have responded in so many different ways to try to build a resilient food system. And in the last couple of years, we've built a foundation to really try to leverage some new opportunities. And Glenda really prepared this PowerPoint. This is our first rollout of this of our new grant, because UC Ag and Natural Resources, which is the grantee with USDA, just signed the agreement with USDA last Friday. So we're really excited to launch here as well. So, but you can see the variability in the slide of some sectors of the economy went up, some went down, but just tremendous disruption. So next slide, please, Josh. So the last couple of years, though, have really shown us that there's so many new opportunities to support our food systems, and so many of the federal and state investments over the last couple of years have really gone toward boosting and replicating and building upon the best practices and the responses that we've all come together. And you know, we're trying to take a triple bottom line approach on this for prosperity, people, and a healthy environment and planet, and looking at the whole supply chain from production and growing through processing, distributing, and consumers. And we really this is just a mosaic of, you can see the ways that people have responded throughout our food system and the opportunities that we're really excited about. So as Tricia mentioned, next slide, please, Josh. The USDA Agricultural Marketing Services has awarded cooperative agreements to 12 regions around the country to support USDA's work on resilient food supply chains. And we put together a grant for the Southwest region, which is 4 states, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the goals are really to support, as Glenda mentioned, the business side of things, the producers, the farmers, the growers, all the people that are in the supply chain, getting food to people. And so it's really to boost that part of the competitiveness and the resiliency of all these businesses. And so, consistent with the outline that Tricia gave on the target of beneficiaries, the centers are really trying to support small and mid-sized businesses, producers, processors, aggregators, and distributors, because those are the ones that really have been very impacted through the last pandemic and downturn, but also that's a foundation for resilient local economies. And so we're really focused on prioritizing these underserved communities and businesses, but it's also looking at kind of our next generation of farmers and food entrepreneurs and food producers. Next slide, please, Josh. So in California and the Southwest states, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, we have received a $35 million grant, which is going to be managed by UC Ag and Natural Resources in California. And the purposes of the grant are to expand markets and access for all of these producers and reach new markets, including retail, wholesale, and in particular, we're really focused on institutional procurement, schools and hospitals, and other local government kind of things. Because for us, and that's really a priority for us here in our region, these are dollars that are going outside of our region or our communities or the state. And we want to reinvest and build our local food economies and use these dollars as a way to stimulate and support new markets. So that's a big priority, but we really need, and this graphic shows, if you look in the middle here, the food hub, that's the infrastructure that we need to connect the producers to all these markets. So the new USDA grant to support infrastructure is really going to be vital. It's kind of the market maker for us. It's the connective tissue to connect the producers to the market opportunities. So the grant also is going to be including a focus on tribal nations and a particular focus on the rural colonias along the border. So we'll be collaborating with other states on that as well. So next slide, please. As you can imagine, with 4 states and food systems, it's going to be a very interesting process. It does include the departments of agriculture from each of the 4 states, academia and universities, such as our UC partners here. And then it includes local partners such as Valley Vision or nonprofits and for-profits that are working on the food system. So we've designed a hub and spoke system to deliver the services and programs of the grant. And it's going to be a very dynamic, interesting process. We kind of have a hub and spoke. So we have a network of collaborating partners, and then they're going to work with stakeholders throughout their areas. So of course, with California being the largest state, we have kind of a little bit more complex system. But we spent a lot of time last year on the planning grant, and we consulted with everybody across the 4 states and kind of shared information about how to design the network. And it's kind of a work in progress, but I think everybody's really excited about this opportunity and eager to work together. So a big focus of the grant is technical assistance, which will be provided both on-site and through distance learning. And we're going to have a leadership council that's going to work with the states. It's going to have all state representation, but we're going to be very much engaged in kind of a learning network. Next slide, please. So through the technical assistance, we're going to have a full suite of services and programs for farm and food businesses. Business planning, financial management, legal and regulatory. We know there's a lot around safety, training, certification, succession planning, all the things that you hear about on a day-to-day basis working with all of the producers and food distributors. We're really having a focus too on value-added products. We're trying to help capture more of the value from our food production. We know from a lot of research that a lot of the value add goes out of our regions or our states. So we're trying to create, again, the infrastructure that allows people to capture that and get new markets. Again, as I mentioned, in a focus on institutional procurement as a market driver as well. Next slide, please. And then part of the program includes a business builder process, which will provide subawards to businesses and farmers. So it includes seed grants and development grants. And these will help with really the practical sides of things, the business planning, how do you get ready to get more funding to expand or start your operations. And so a lot of our network partners include groups like Kitchen Table Advisors or CAF or FarmLink that already work on the ground. So we're investing in these partners that have the expertise and giving them more capacity to expand. And then already grants, competitive grants to assist businesses as well directly. And I should mention that one of the core partners through this are the Small Business Development Centers. They work with a whole network of businesses across the 4 regions or 4 states. So this is going to be a great opportunity to build on all the assets that they have as well. And then another thing that we want to really emphasize is $35 million split across 4 states over 5 years. We kind of see this as seed money, so we're going to be very intentional about trying to support everybody in the network to leverage resources, the kind of things that Tricia talked about, not only their infrastructure program, but all the other programs that USDA has, for instance, the Economic Development Administration, SBA, and then all the state programs. We're really going to be working over the next few years to get more resources and investment into the network and really help the system partners and the businesses that they're supporting. So it's very intentional to leverage and to try to keep investing and getting more resources for people. And then we're going to be working in a formalized partnership, but it's not just the West. We'll be working with the whole network nationally, which is really exciting. And you could tell, I think, from hearing Tricia talk, that the federal partners are going to be helping us at the state levels as well. And so we'll have train-the-trainer programs, and we'll have a whole community of practice network. It's really been exciting talking to people in the other states. People are doing great things on the ground, so we're really going to help lift each other. Next slide, please. So these are the key partners. Glenda is a master at getting lots of logos on a slide. And so you can see it's kind of in 3 buckets. We've got the government agencies or partners, so it's all the state departments of food and agriculture. Then we have our university, which brings the research, teaching, and extension capabilities, and then we have the local partners in the industry. So I think the program's really designed to bring together all pieces, and then you can see the range of partners that we have here in the state and in the other states. And then next slide, Josh. So the key partners all receive funding, and then they're going to be working with these network of collaborators. So these are the stakeholders on the ground that are on the front line, that are working in the communities. And another thing to mention, especially in California, but I think in the other states as well, the UC Co-op Extension partners are going to be very active in supporting our communities that are needing our assistance. And it's really a fabulous network, and they have built new resources on staff that work on local and regional food systems, so that's going to be an added asset for the community. So you can see the range of partners that are in this network already, and we'll keep adding people as we go along in organizations. So one of the things we wanted to just give you a brief overview of is the kind of things that are coming out of this. On the next slide, please. Josh, and building on on the foundation we already have, so here are some examples. There's like Arizona has a federally designated Rural Development Council, and it serves all of Arizona counties, and it's urban, rural, and suburban, but especially focused on socially disadvantaged areas. And so they have a business accelerator program that's focused on minority entrepreneurs, and they've graduated over 50 health and food-related businesses. So we're really looking at that entrepreneurship side, growing sort of the businesses of the future. And that's a very exciting thing. And then, you know, the Arizona Economic Recovery Center really focused on lifting people through the pandemic. Next slide, please. So another example here is some of the partners that we have in California. They provide technical assistance and education to our growers and food producers. So it includes CAF, Kitchen Table Advisors, some of the UC programs, Master Food Preservers, ALBA. So we have a lot of partners already, and we're really excited to build on their programs. Next slide, please. Then another thing that we really want to focus on, which is where the state partners really come in, is improving the policy procurement and the infrastructure side and supporting new markets. California is incredibly active in farm to school and other programs. And so these new grants coming in from USDA and others to build our food hub infrastructure will really be a great asset for us. And it's going to give us that middle connectivity market connector again. Another, excuse me, another example is expanding on successful programs already. So the Center for Good Food Purchasing has really shown us a lot of best practices, how to use procurement to create new markets and equitable food systems, because you're creating businesses in communities that are underinvested in. And this is a nationally network adopted model, and they work with school districts around the country. So it's very practical things like, how do you even do procurement? Here's templates and tools. And so there's going to be a lot of diffusion of knowledge gained already through this network that we've developed. Another one is using fairgrounds as business incubators. This is a really creative thing that they've done up on the North Coast, and they have a lot of small food producers, including dairy and others. So their Redwood Acres Fairgrounds has nurtured over 15 businesses so far. And you all know how challenged our rural communities are on the business entrepreneurship side and the food side. So this has been a very successful example, and lots of interest in replicating these kind of models. And then the last example is us here in this region, Valley Vision. We have done a food system action plan with the Community Foundation, which really focuses on taking a holistic approach to what's going on in our community. We're so-called America's Farm to Fork capital, but we have very high levels of food insecurity. We had that even before the pandemic. So this is what that map illustrates, is some of the gaps that we've had. So we're very intentionally trying to build a food system that addresses those gaps. And it's not just providing food for communities in need, it's using the food system as a pathway to build businesses and economic opportunity in the communities, but taking a holistic approach of supporting growers and farmers and addressing food access, food security, and food education. But what we've done is we've woven this into our region's economic strategy, which is federally funded, and now that's a platform for the state's Community Economic Resilience Fund. So it's really how you can build a dual approach to address needs in your community while supporting and expanding your food economy. And we're also working on a YOLO Food Hub network and working with other regions across the country to see how we can build infrastructure, not just as a physical single facility, but with a network of partners. So that's been really exciting to see the innovations that are occurring across the country. And so next couple, just finishing up slides. One of the things we really wanted to emphasize is that we've been building on the work in the communities that have been going on for a long time, and working with partners like you on issues of environmental resiliency, water, energy, et cetera. Broadband is a big issue for us, access to capital. Joy is our big champion and leader on that. Research and innovation, capital access. So we feel like a lot of these pieces are going to be able to come into the network too through the new grant. And we have a lot of great state and federal partners on the journey with us. And one of the last slides here is how we can think about in our own communities leveraging food economy, thinking of this as an industry cluster. So it brings all the pieces together, and it uses technology, and it has impacts on the sustainability and viability of our natural environments, because we're dealing with all the impacts of climate change. And we've seen, all of us have seen it, we've seen it here in the region, and so we're trying to build resiliency from that standpoint as well. So that's our overview, and thank you for being our guinea pig for our first presentation.
Thank you very much, Trish. It's fascinating to see all the work being done together. And I always say the business side is many times left out of the equation. And I think this builds a very resilient program for agriculture and industry. So
Thank you.
great. Do we have questions? Joy?
Well, first of all, great presentation, and you do such great work.
Oh, thank you,
I've
Joy.
had the honor of going to see the center, and it's really just fantastic. And I'm so gratified to get the clarification that broadband is part of infrastructure, and particularly at the fairgrounds. So thank you very much for underscoring that.
Thank you for your leadership, Joy.
Yeah, we always support broadband. Linda?
Yeah, fantastic presentation. I'm glad you got to do that first. I have to actually deliver that same deck to the Partnership for San Joaquin Valley this Friday morning down in Hanford. So Trish and I and a lot of the partners, we're going to be sharing that deck and perhaps improving it, expanding it as we go along, because it's very much a learning process. I mean, it was kind of nerve-wracking putting this proposal together. Most of us actually were afraid to do it because this is a big thing we just bit off to try to chew. So we are going to be counting on a lot of partners to help make this thing successful. But I'm really excited Trish Kelly has agreed to be the center director. Quite frankly, Karen Ross and I both agreed we weren't actually going to submit the proposal if she hadn't agreed to do that. Because there just aren't many people that could pull this off the way Trish can. So thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from Chris?
Thank you, Don. Thank you for your presentation. Question more so on the demand side. I think you kind of started using at least framing resiliency, in the context of COVID and the relatively flattening that occurred. There were shifts, but disproportionately the move went over to retail because food service was largely disrupted. So the questions that I really have is, so you identified seed money, 30-something million, right? So relatively small, significant, but still limited. So if with this the stimuli, which was COVID and resulting actions, showed this disruption, and as part of this program is looking at resiliency moving forward, focusing on, let's say, smaller producers, giving them a greater opportunity to get a leg up, particularly on the value add side, which we know I represent a region which has, namely the leafy greens major producers, extremely capital intensive. So where you're focused on helping smaller to medium sized businesses in the value add arena, hugely capital intensive, succeed by competing and helping to fill what has been, right, a relatively flat demand for products. We even saw it during COVID. It just shifted, a relatively flat demand. I'm just trying to think through what more, maybe what 2.0 thoughts might you have moving forward where, say, if I was assuming there were going to be winners from this program, most of that money would have to be concentrated amongst a limited few to try to give them the most injection of support to hopefully have a long enough runway so that they can have a chance to succeed, or else I would only assume some companies would be put at major risk because if they are value add, there's just not going to be enough there in the demand wheelhouse, nationwide or regional specific, to continue to consume enough products to help make them become successful companies longer term. Again, I have somewhat of a view, I won't call it a bias, but again, these companies that largely that I work with, they're at a massive scale, right? They're the contributors of the 4.5 trillion servings of greens amongst just 330 million Americans. And so where we're trying to do more to support more companies to get into this mix, I'm just trying to understand from your perspective and experience, like what more could be done, and it might be more resources to help with that demand side of the equation.
Well, I'll try to answer as best I can for now and say that also I think that this is an evolving field of practice that we're trying to figure this out. I think in our region, for instance, a lot of our dollars go out and they don't always go even to your region. They go out of country or out of state completely. So, but we're not trying, I think, what we're trying to do is grow new markets too, because that's increasing the demand side too, and that's why we want to focus on those opportunities in the demand side. And there's shifts in the marketplace that are occurring too, that we want to capitalize on, you know, the interest of where your food comes from, healthier food, if you will, or functional foods, but a lot of the food entrepreneurs are kind of developing new food products too. So but I think it's also not an either or. It's like, how can people begin to be supply chains into companies that, such as you're working with? But I think then the question of what you're saying about the capital level of investment, it's starting small and it's trying to leverage other things. And I think we need to all be in communication with each other about how we build these food systems of the future for the resiliency against shocks. And I'm going to ask Linda to respond to that too, because there's a lot here.
Yeah, I just want to share, I had an amazing meeting at dinner last night with some folks that Secretary Ross connected me with that you definitely need to meet, Chris. So this was a gentleman from Imperial County who at the start of the pandemic was simply trying to keep his growers alive, you know, as everything was in chaos. And long story short, over the next 2 or 3 years, has built this amazing growing, shipping, connecting, aggregation hub system that is providing fresh fruits and vegetables to the food banks. And I think we've all seen that, and that's exciting. But what he shared with me that I wasn't aware of, that I think is one of the most huge opportunities for California probably, is the recent activity in Medicare, Medi-Cal, and health centers towards prescribing food as part of health and wellness. Now, we've known for a while that food is part of a healthy diet, but for it to actually become a prescription, and what he's been doing with 5 counties, the 5 southernmost counties for the last year or so, is actually tailoring boxes delivered to Medi-Cal folks, individuals, and he's up to, I think he said several, semi-trucks a week. This has really grown. And that's just in 5 counties. And there's now, I think he said 5 or 6 states that are allowing this same type of action. For California fruits and vegetables, I mean, we're the ones that are probably going to be able to take a huge advantage of that kind of food as part of the health ecosystem opportunities in the future as far as new markets.
Yeah, and I think that's where the policy side comes in. There's the White House National Strategy on Hunger, Health, and Nutrition is really looking at that idea of food as medicine, but there are regulatory things that need to happen to be able to do that. And that's a big priority for us in this region. Santana Diaz from UC Davis Health is really leading that food as medicine charge. So I think that's an example of new market opportunities. A lot of people with health challenges don't consume as many fruits and vegetables, for instance, as they could. So it's a new market opportunity as well as improving health outcomes, so.
Go right ahead.
Comment. So Chris, so Glenda, thanks for sharing that. So that, at least within the space that I'm in, Chris, I mean, that's kind of the shift. People are looking to change systems, right? Systemic change or institutional changes. And then on the capital side, I think you make a really good point in terms of capital intensive. I think the other innovative aspect to that work is that you have a lot of social impact investors that are interested in working with these types of programs, and then a lot of philanthropists that are looking to bring together integrated capital to make these projects happen. And that's on the capital side. So you gave the innovation on markets, and then the capital, integrated capital approach it's kind of what's bringing it together. So it's a really good question, though.
And the premise for my thought is, again, 35 million is the seed, but not wanting to see that where it can be successful,
Yes.
that those that have an opportunity to win can really win within this system, as opposed to, hey, we've done the best job we could with limited funds, spreading it out, looking into a new system that is so capital intensive that the risk is sky high, that those companies can be very vulnerable after supports change, policies change, climates change. Like what's that base, market support that's going to be there to help those companies at the end of the day compete. And so, yeah, it remains to be seen, but encouraged.
No, I agree with you. I mean, you always have to have a market to be able to sell into, and you really have to have that as your goal, and you have to have the connections to make that happen. It's tough.
I'll just add one last thought. You know, anytime you take on a big initiative like this, it's always scary. But one of the things that makes me really, really excited about our potential for success here is that when we designed this proposal, we explicitly went around the region and said, who's got a program or a process that's working, that's successful? And what we're going to do is learn from them, scale them up, and spread them around the entire 4 states. So we're not reinventing the wheel, and we're not duplicating, and we're not wasting all the time and money and energy that that action tends to waste. And you know, that's why we showed the examples of some of the existing good programs we can build upon, and ones like this guy already doing the box. And you know, when I talked to him, I said, are you trying to take over the world, or are you going to be willing to share your model with other regions? He's like, oh yeah, I want to share it with other regions. We want everybody doing this. So see, there's just so much we can learn from each other. Again, not reinventing the wheel. I think that's what gives us a chance to hit the ground running and be very successful.
I think one other thing is this public sector infrastructure investment is going to really help especially the small and the startup businesses, because they're kind of reducing the barriers to entry and they're allowing them to get a foothold. So that's one thing we've heard, like in our food hub work here, because the county, Yolo County invested $2 million in the original, food hub. That's helping reduce the cost of what a grower would have to do to participate, for instance, in the hub. But you raise really important issues, and that's the kind of discussion we're going to have as we go forward.
Michelle, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. And really appreciate the presentation. Just in one of your earlier slides, I think you had mentioned that, you know, having a focus also on marketing, you know, value added products. And I'm just curious, you know, how climate change, if it factors in, if it's considered, you know, just climate friendly agricultural products, you know, that, you know, is that a component? Is this factored in, or, you know, and if so, how?
Yes, thank you for the question. For sure, the resiliency includes the environmental resiliency and adapting to all the changes that we have to. In this region, we've seen almost every barometer of climate change in the last 2 years and the impacts on the communities and the growers. And so that's very much included. We're looking things like food hubs that support climate-friendly agricultural practices and products, too, that are intentionally grown to be more resource efficient, and in consideration of that. But also, what do the growers and food producers need to be able to move to more sustainable models? And then the marketing side is that consumers are very interested in knowing how their food is being produced and brought to them. So thank you for the question. That's really going to be important, yes.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Trish, for the presentation.
Okay.
I just had a couple of thoughts and questions as well. In regards to timeline, kind of what's the kind of scope of the grant funding, and what's kind of the timeline for the program? So if I'm a farmer in the Central Valley and wanting to access services of the program, how are we telling that story, and what's the timeline for implementation?
Thank you, yes. Well, the grant just got signed last Friday, so I think the next steps, and I'll let Glenda answer the question too, but that UCA&R has to execute the contracts with all the collaborating partners, and then I think we'll be ready to go, but it's going to be at least a couple months, I think.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, this grant has been moving at the speed of light compared to most big grants. When USDA actually gave us the word that we would be receiving it, they actually changed our budget significantly and changed up our states also. The original proposal had Nevada, Arizona, California, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands for $100 million. But that was when USDA was thinking that they were only going to create 5 or 6 of these. They very rightfully, I totally agree with their goal to cover the entire U.S. And so in doing that, they really looked at where there were opportunities. And one of the things they did is they've created an island So the Caribbean, the Pacific Islands are one of those centers. And they asked us to pick up Utah, because as you see, it just really made sense, geographically for Utah to be part of this region. And the budget is 35 instead of 100 million. But we had 2 weeks to turn around brand-new budgets and add in a brand-new partner. And I got to say, a big shout out to all the folks that worked on this. Not just my team, but others. Like Trisha's people, she had folks in her office, and many other partners had people working on that. And we not only turned around new budgets, added a partner, but every single person that had a letter in there and a commitment got those in less than 2 weeks. USDA then turned around the final contracts in about 2 weeks. So again, for a large grant, this feels like the speed of light to me. We're going to do our best to get the contracts out to the key partners within the next month or two. Because again, there's a lot of legal and contractual stuff, but people are already getting ready to, they're already organizing meetings, pulling people together, et cetera. Because again, we're building off existing programs. That's going to help speed it up a lot. So the timeline is I hope everything's up and running within the next 2 or 3 months, which is literally months sooner. And having a center director already on board, that's one of the reasons we made a decision that we had to know who that person is. Because with other big grants we're dealing with, one of our key problems is we get the grant awarded, and then it takes 6 months to hire the personnel to actually run it. And so you're really running behind time when that's happening.
Perfect. I totally understand that, and thank you. And great work, by the way, in making that happen.
Thanks to USDA, I got to give major kudos to Ag Marketing Services. They've done an amazing job.
One of the areas I know that we need to continue to have kind of discussions on from the department and the UC and also with Valley Vision is kind of the technical assistance piece and how we do that with the regional resilient food system infrastructure grant program, because I think we're going to get a lot of stakeholders interested in technical assistance in that program and how best we leverage the technical assistance funding that you have through your program as well. And then I wanted to kind of put Janae on the spot as well, because this is a huge thing for local food systems, supply chains. So how are we working with all of this funding, the 38.2 million that's going to the resilient food systems, the 35 million going to this, also kind of enhancing the understanding of agriculture as a priority of Ag Vision?
I'm going to defer that question that ties to our Ag Vision to the two folks that are working closely on the project. But I also think if there is additional question to that for one of the committees of the board around integration of the food bank system, and then so as we look at it from an economic development, how that's working and building these resilient communities for our vision, but then also with the food bank system, how that is either supporting or completely separate. If it provides some clarity there, that'd be great.
Yeah, several of those collaborators are food banks or closely aligned with food banks. They're very much part of the system. And as I mentioned, the person I was visiting with last night started off working with food banks. So we see a lot of opportunity to build upon that type of process. And Central Kitchen here, the Sacramento Unified School District, is a great example, as is prior to that Riverside. One of the problems we've had for the last 20 years is the aggregation hub, those folks in the middle, not being there to make the connections. And I was so excited several years ago when Riverside Unified School District chose to be the aggregation hub. And they showed how that could work. And Sacramento's perfected it even more, frankly. I mean, we got a tour of Central Kitchen when we were doing our announcement of the grant award, and Congressman Matsui was with us. And watching how they're doing things there. And I think they're partnering up with the food bank too, as far as, where you have needs for shared cold storage and perhaps some shared facilities. There's a lot of room for us to do more of that.
Go ahead, Bryce.
Thank you for your presentation. And, just to lead off here, I always known, food is like food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. And I always just got to work on that. I got a couple doctors in my family, my brother and one of my cousins, and there's a rice cakes as medicine. I like the idea, make things move with rice cakes, or rice cakes good for your guts. That's a
There goes
we
that
gotta work on
marketing
that.
side
Huh.
already.
Hey, how much on these grants is it about who you know and who you can ask for help? You've got partners listed there. Is it partners where the potential grant applicants would go for a connection for funding. Was that maybe 6 months ago, we had a group here, some of the winners of the Climate Smart grant winners in the state, and I was, just made the observation that that there was a common link between some of the winners as to what consultant they were using for application, and contacted the consultant, and they said, yeah, we can do this. There are these grants, let's do it. And they gave the price tag as what their work would cost, and it opened up a whole new kind of idea. I hear about these programs, and it's always like, well, there's a wall between me and those programs, and how do you make the Velcro work? And it's these partners, right? They're the ones who know how it works. They know where the dates are and how the applications work and what fits. And your thoughts on how important those partners are, and for farmers to actually know who they are and how to, but who they need to talk to.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and that's a great point. There are resources out there, but again, that barrier to finding out about it, navigating an application process, all of those things that this technical assistance is going to try to address, and building off the networks of our collaborating partners and then their stakeholder networks. We're going to be marketing, we're going to be trying to make the access as transparent as possible, but we'll be doing outreach too to try to reach the people who would be good applicants for these kind of grant programs, and just increasing the awareness overall of the resources that are out there and the ease of getting into the network. And it's not to say that the private consultants aren't a valuable part of that too, but we're trying to increase through the networks that are there. And there are people who have experience working with the people who are eligible for all of these resources. And then we have to talk to you about your marketing ideas.
Yeah. If I could add to that, Secretary Ross did an amazing thing a few years ago when CDFA first got that big tranche of funding for climate smart agriculture and SWEEP and some of the environmental farming programs. She decided that if we were going to have people access those kind of programs, they needed assistance, knowing about them and filling out the forms. She contracted with us to provide 10 community educators scattered around the state to reach out to those underserved farmers and communities, make sure they knew about the programs, how to apply, and even help them fill out applications. We've since then expanded that into community educators doing exactly that in a lot of underserved communities on different topics. We do have some of those built into this grant to go out and help people know about it and access it. It's part of the personnel that are built into the grant.
Joy?
Well, I love the concept of an ecosystem. I think that's critical, and I also love the helping people with the grant. The art of the grant is huge. There's so much money sloshing around, but accessing it is very, very difficult. My question is there such a thing as a USDA recognized food hub? So that we can look to these things and say, like a fairground is a recognized entity, is a food hub a recognized entity?
USDA has done a lot of research on food hubs over the years. We did a food hub study here working with them, with our Council of Governments in like 2013 to 15, and that's what actually led to this Yolo County supervisors investing in a Yolo food hub. But there were about 300 food hubs across the country, and they take many different forms. They can be for-profit, nonprofit, cooperative. One evolution that we've seen as we've been working the last couple of years is food hub networks. It's not just a facility. A couple of the networks are multi-state. So we are looking at those, but there are some core concepts around hubs, Joy. I'm not sure if there's anyone certified, but there is a community of practice around those too. And so they're not easy to actually stand up, which is why it's taken us almost 10 years and we've proven that it could be financially viable, but they're not small enterprises financially either. But there is a lot of research about what are the components of a hub. and what a hub can do, because some are just market aggregators. We're looking at one that could add value-added produce into markets, including customized products for schools or food banks or hospitals. We're trying to find the market niche too. But I think that we know that that's the market connector that we need, especially to help aggregate for smaller farmers, train them on, business planning, forward planting, things like that, the GAP certification, and just how to work to get enough product for scale to what institutional buyers need, for instance. What's a good question?
All right, Josh, could you check online to see if we have any questions on this agenda item?
Yes, if you'd like to make a public comment on this agenda item, please use your hand icon and I will unmute your line. And we do have two written questions. The first is, do you have any concerns about federal clawback of this program or the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant?
No.
That might have been why the contracts were processed so quickly, but they are signed.
And the next was, what is an example of some work that's being done in California Central Valley as kind of part of this project?
Do you want to go? Well, first of all, the Economic Development Administration made a huge investment in the San Joaquin Valley for the Build Back Better initiative for Fresno Drive and the 3 Fs? Future Food Fresno. So that's a huge project that's going on right now, and that's a $65 million investment. But Fresno has been doing a lot in this space. Glenda had on this slide Central Valley Ag Plus. That was a designation from EDA earlier to invest in manufacturing ecosystem for food and beverage manufacturing. That was the whole Central Valley, including our region and the North State. So we've been working on a lot of these initiatives for a long time. And so, and CAF, organizations like CAF work in the region, so they're all networked into this process. And we invite more.
And Fresno
course.
State's one of our key
Yeah.
partners down there
Yeah.
organizing, as they have been for many years. I'm doing this presentation to the Partnership for San Joaquin Valley's meeting Thursday morning, and we'll be asking them to participate even more.
I'm seeing no further questions at this time.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We'll look forward to a continuing discussion and how all this goes. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, I want to respect their time.
Okay, all right.
Oh, Drew.
Drew?
Want us all up in a panel?
Yeah, well, I think we have
Yeah,
public
that'd be
comment. So Drew,
great.
if you have public comment on that.
Hand raised back there.
Yeah, Drew, did you have public comment on?
No, no comments on that.
All right, you said Luisa's here as well?
Yeah, she's online. So yeah, so Drew, come to the podium. Yeah.
Good morning, Karen. How are you? Yeah. The question I wanted initially discussed was in terms of the food hubs. What, in terms of I think 3 months ago, what's the status in terms of the planning?
We can't hear you, but do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself so
Oh,
that it's
okay,
on the
I'm sorry,
record?
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
thanks, Drew.
I'm sorry. Drew Brown, former board member of this prestigious body, former agricultural economist of this department, and also in the legislature in terms of working for the various agriculture committees. Can you hear me?
Having a difficult time. If
Yeah.
you could, get a little closer there, or we have a different mic. Yeah,
Do I have to do it again? Okay, I got it. I wanted to, first of all, ask the question in terms of time frame, in terms of the hubs have been established. What's the time? Where's the planning as it relates to the program, the initial, the 38 million units today.
And Josh has been in some of the more recent conversations. We have just executed the cooperative agreement. We will put together our plan, which is the process and timelines for how we will work within the state to develop the full-fledged plan of how we will put out the competitive grant announcements. So I think we have the 1 year to put that entire planning process together.
Okay. And just an observation, if I may. And gentlemen, your name, sir?
Chris Valades.
Chris, pleasure meeting you. While you were speaking as an economist for the department and vision of marketing, you sound just like the church, Banano, those guys in terms of the lettuce industry. And those were pioneers in terms of the industry, moving the public sector and developing the attributes of revenue also for the industry, as well as more satisfying selection of products, agricultural products for the consumers. So all I wanted to say is that I really appreciated your remarks, but it was industry. They took the lead in terms of a lot of things you're talking about today.
Thank you very much, Drew. No more public comment? All right. We will move on to our next panel discussion. I'd like to welcome Tim Johnson, California Rice Commission, Jamie Johansson with the California Farm Bureau. Tim is a founding president and CEO of the California Rice Commission, the CRC. Tim leads one of the state's most highly regarded agricultural organizations. The Sacramento-based CRC represents all growers and handlers that comprise the state's rice industry, which annually contributes more than $1.8 billion to the California economy. Jamie Johansson is the president of the California Farm Bureau. This organization strives to protect and improve the ability of farmers and ranchers engaged in production agriculture to provide a reliable supply of food and fiber through responsible stewardship of resources. A voluntary, nonprofit, non-governmental organization, the California Farm Bureau works on the behalf of its members in 53 farm bureaus statewide. Also virtually joining us today will be Louisa McCovey, a Yurok tribal member who serves as the Yurok tribe's environmental program director. The Yurok tribe currently is the largest tribe in California with more than 5,000 enrolled members. The tribe provides numerous services to the local community and membership with its more than 200 employees. The tribe's major initiatives include the Hoopa Yurok Settlement Act, dam removal, natural resource protection, sustainable economic development enterprises, and land acquisition. Welcome to all three of you. Good to have you here.
Who's going to start?
Who's going to be starting here? Have you done?
Always defer to Farm Bureau.
He's the senior, though. Sure. I will
Thank you,
start,
Jamie.
but thanks again for inviting California Farm Bureau to be here for this important discussion. Really an exciting grant, and I had an opportunity to sit through the first two presentations, and we've all sat through a lot of grant presentations, but I'm telling you, this one, as fast as it's rolling out, and the whirlwind education that I've had to have over the past few days just to be here, it really is kind of exciting, and I appreciate Glenda's comments as well. Again, Jamie Johansson, President of the California Farm Bureau. At Farm Bureau, the most important thing about being president is that you are also a farmer. So I am a first-generation farmer up in Butte County, Oroville area, where we farm olives and citrus. I started in 1993 with that and still going. Even made it through the pandemic, but certainly have insights of our own company of how a resilient food chain almost cracked under COVID. I think we saw some weaknesses in it, but certainly to our credit in California, it did not break, but it felt pretty close. And I do want to recognize that obviously farms like myself were hurt, and some farms devastated by that. And maybe even to this day, we see among members haven't fully recovered. So we recognize that, but look forward to putting our input and working with the Department of Food and Ag on this progressive grant opportunity put out by USDA. You know, of course, as the nation's leading agricultural state, all of us here today understand the significant importance of ensuring our agricultural activities remain viable. Keeping farming sustainable helps ensures our nation remains well-fed and supplied with these essential commodities and resources, from traditional row crops and specialty crops to nurseries, timbering operations, ranching, dairy, and more. California truly offers a unique agricultural environment and plays a critical role in our nation's food supply. I often like to say agriculture makes California essential to the United States, if not to the world. Not only that, but in general, to build on the essential of agriculture in California, we also export billions of dollars in agricultural products, as you well know, to all corners of the Grove. Given our substantial economic footprint, we appreciate USDA and CDFA's interest in helping support these practices through new funding and growth opportunities. The USDA's Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program represents a positive step forward, ensuring government and state aid addresses all elements of our food supply chains. Opportunities for maintaining or even growing production can only be realized if processing and transportation capacities are equally supported. Unfortunately, challenges persist which place limits on such prospects. Limited labor supply, shifting workforces, consolidation, and business closures during pandemic continue to drive some of these ongoing problems. While inflation, as well as increased input costs, natural disasters, and other events also apply significant pressure on agricultural producers. We see this in everything from beef and poultry markets to wildfire cleanups and timber processing. Freight and shipping challenges are felt equally between producers, processors, wholesalers, and retailers. In the trucking industry, an aging and shrinking workforce continues to place added stress and costs onto a business as they look to move their goods. Last fall, the American Trucking Association estimated U.S. businesses were roughly 80,000 drivers short of what is needed to adequately address existing demands. They believe that gap will double within the next decade, and while we avoided a labor crisis in the rail freight industry, ongoing problems still persist with the movement of goods there as well. A healthy food supply chain requires the full system to work cohesively in order to ensure our nation remains well-fed. This means successfully bridging together production and processing with wholesalers and retailers. From picking and packaging to the end-of-the-line sales, we believe additional support through the RFSA could play a critical role in helping address our shortfalls where shortfalls exist. Again, I am encouraged that this is a comprehensive plan to go along with grants that, as we heard from the last presenter, that are already out there for us. You know, one of the things as processors, one of the first commodities we saw that consumers saw empty on the shelf actually were eggs. That was the first one in the shortage of eggs. And of course, we saw that as the retailers and the wholesalers and the restaurants closed down during COVID, the grocery store shelves became empty because of the huge demand for eggs and a little bit of a panic. What that required was really a pivoting from a bulk distribution system to single servings or a dozen eggs, which is no small feat. It actually took we had to redo labeling laws when it comes to food service eggs and how they're labeled, also the packaging wise and repackaging. We saw that there was a difficulty in the supply chain, and many of us producers, as a small one, I'm a small, we do bottle by bottle. If I had to put together 55 gallons or a truckload of olive oil, I wouldn't have the equipment to do that, to move it. We've learned that we need to pivot, and I think this grant funding does allow those opportunities for small to medium size who also understand. I started farming in '93, doing olive oil, just straight extra virgin olive oil, and you quickly learn after 5 or 6 years, no matter how successful you are in agriculture, you're going to have competitors. We had only 10 of them in the early 90s, and you can see how the olive oil industry has grown now, which speaks to the resiliency of agriculture in California, very competitive. You quickly learn is that I have to diversify. So we started buying lemons and oranges from growers down in Ventura, because we'll never compete with growing lemons in Ventura when you can produce them year-round. In Butte County, we get them maybe 1 month out of the year, buying from there, but certainly grew to a point where we wanted to try growing our own, and adapted those varieties that could go up there, like a Meyer lemon or a blood orange up in our area. And so we started flavoring our oils to add another SKU there to attract more people to compete, and then quickly realized, hey, we've got a lot of fresh fruit here. What if we could sell oranges and lemons? It took a while. It's a little more work, but certainly it's more rewarding if you can sell it. And so now, to a point of the diversity of that, we sell all that we can fresh, happy to buy from other farmers if we have to for olive oil. And then what we can't sell, we can put in. But that's that diversity of product line that a small to medium farm needs to develop. And, you know, we've certainly seen that in the rice industries, and not only rice cakes, but enjoy rice chips now, as well as was pointed out. So, you know, I think this is a great building block, and I think of every crisis that we've had, major crisis, and I think of 9/11, right? And the crisis of what does our essential services look like in a time of terrorist attack? Where do we put our focus on? And we didn't know coming out of 9/11 that certainly that work, that took around 10 to 12 years. I don't believe, Secretary Ross can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that wasn't finalized until around maybe 2010, 2011, in terms of what the essential services were, those discussions ongoing, but never losing that focus of, we got to be prepared for the next terrorist attack. In this example, little did we know that work would bring us through COVID, and it was the ability to call Secretary Ross the day that the governor, you know, closed everything down, and to get that working, essential services, and the reassurance of agriculture to go to work. And there was a little hiccup with the Truckers Association. Was that essential? And we were the first in the nation to correct that problem immediately, to get trucks rolling, because we needed our inputs to come to us and also out there. In fact, we had many state farm bureaus calling us, asking us, how did you get that through there? And we said, simply ask. Because we had done that work. And I also think of having served on the Oroville City Council, the major work following Hurricane Katrina in 2004, in which we had regional planning of catastrophic events. In Oroville, it would be a dam failure, which almost happened, but a quick response by Governor Brown fixed it up rather quickly, but it would be major flooding there in Oroville. And of course, in Paradise, we saw there the endless practice and having multiple exits in case of a wildfire. And of course, tragically, 80 people lost. But that work that we did when it came to addressing that problem and having a plan, learning from the past and looking forward, that it may not be exactly the same, but there will be a similar situation. We can address that. And I think we're there with COVID. So I appreciate not only CDFA's quick action in grabbing and working with this grant and working with other states, but USDA in providing it. And I think it is a very, it's an exciting grant that is very holistic and can build on that. And so at California Farm Bureau, with 53 county farm bureaus and the media that we have, we look forward to promoting this. And as we work with underserved farmers and other minority farmers, they have simply asked us, we're like, what do you need? And they're like, we need information. We need to know when these grants are available, what is available, what are the services, and that's what we do at Farm Bureau. So we're perfectly situated to assist you any way we can on these projects, so thank you.
Perhaps we'd like to go to our tribal member.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. That's what I was thinking too. Louisa, are you up?
There she is.
Ah, welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Louisa McCovey. I'm the Environmental Department Director for the Yawk Tribe. And just a couple updates from what was said earlier in the brief description about the tribe. We are the largest tribe in California with over 6,300 members, and we have about 400 plus employees now. So we've grown quite a bit from that description. Today, I was asked to come on this panel to talk a little bit today about the RFSI grant program and how it might be beneficial to tribes in California and in our tribe as well. Our reservation consists of about 60,000 acres, 1 mile on each side of the Klamath River, from the mouth of the river up to the town of 44 river miles up to the town of Witchbeck. So we have quite a bit of land to manage on the Klamath River. Within the environmental department, we have 5 programs, all of which are 100% grant funded. So we are no stranger to grant writing, administering, carrying out the functions of grants. And nothing really happens within this tribe and department without really gritty grant writing and determined, disciplined folks to do that work. We are not a revenue tribe. We don't have a casino that generates a lot of revenue. We're a natural resources based tribe in California. And so with the support of the tribal council, our staff and our people are focused on land restoration, river restoration. As you mentioned before, the Yurok tribe is involved in the largest dam removal project in the history of this country with the Klamath Dam Removal Project. So, you know, I'm a Yurok tribal member. I live here on the reservation, proud to raise my 4 kids here with my husband. Though there are some difficulties that come with being in such a rural area in terms of food access. We live in what's classified by the USDA as a food desert. And so there's some real access issues for our tribal membership living at home on the reservation. Some of our members have to drive up to an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to the nearest grocery station or grocery store to shop for food. And so within the environmental department in 2020, we recognized some of these difficulties and decided to formalize a food sovereignty program. So within that time, we've built our capacity, and like I said, through grant funding, federal, state, private funders, just really hard-nosed grant writing, are now up to a staff of 6. And we just planted an orchard of 40 trees at one of our sites last month. And so we're building the capacity now to help solve some of those problems, along with building access to traditional food sources and the conventional garden and orchard food. And so, you know, I'm looking through the RFSI program. I think, you know, the funding can probably help solve some of those problems for not just for the Yurok tribe, but for other tribes across the state of California. I do have some maybe suggestions or ways that could help these funds be more accessible to tribes. Sometimes we see when I saw that there's a match requirement in the grant solicitation. And I think that, you know, for tribes, a lot of the times when they're not revenue based and there's no cash on hand, a high match requirement is going to be a deal breaker, and tribes will probably walk away at that point. So if there's any way to eliminate that match requirement or find alternative sources that can help tribes meet that match requirement, that would probably be helpful. At other times when we've had California state grants, the indirect allowance of tribes is sometimes not allowed. Sometimes there's an indirect cap. And so if there's a way to honor tribes' indirect cost rate, that would also be helpful. And then, so we have a pretty high capacity at the Yurok tribe to administer grants. We have a fully developed finance office. We have a grants administrator person that helps with grants, but not every tribe has that. And, you know, as easy as the state can make it on tribes to administer grants and submit reimbursement requests, and just the burden that comes along with that, I think would also be helpful, because not every tribe has that full capacity to administer and carry out these grants. And if it's hard to write grants and administer them, then what we're seeing is that the benefits of these grants and the co-benefits of these grants kind of remain privileged and something that tribes can't access. And so if there's a way to decrease that administrative burden, allow full indirect and not have a match requirement, I think those are real tangible ways to make these funds more accessible and allowable for tribes to access. Yeah, we are looking forward to this grant program and looking forward to working with the state as we develop our food sovereignty program here on the Yurok Reservation, and have a lot more work to do to solve the problems that we have here and across the state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Louisa. Appreciate that. Tim, we'll move to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, and colleagues. Please go gentle on me, Bryce. Appreciate the opportunity to talk today. As I talk with Josh in addressing this grant, really wanted to come to you all with a little bit of perspective from purely a production agriculture viewpoint, but really through the lens of our last drought, right? What did we learn about infrastructure in that 3-year drought that might be helpful to you as you consider this infrastructure grant program? To give you an idea of where we've been since I was here last, we planted only 256,000 acres of rice last year. That was the smallest rice crop since 1958, right? Our fathers' rice crop. Give you an idea of how many acres were idled in the Sacramento Valley rice and other crops. It was between 370,000 to 450,000 acres in the Sacramento Valley that did not get water for planting last year. That was a $13 billion impact on the economy and 14,000 jobs and over $732,000 in lost wages, right? Those are the ones that really, really hurt. Importantly, right, as we look at climate and other factors, it was not equally distributed across the Sacramento Valley, right? Folks on the eastern side of the valley that were served off of the Feather River complex, they were able to plant pretty well all the acres that they could get to, right? It was reduced, but only by about 20%. However, if you were in Colusa or Glenn County, parts of Sutter County, you actually planted almost no rice. Right? So in a boardroom like this, I would have one member on the left of the chair that grew no rice, none. Oh, and by the way, his almonds froze also. And then on the right side of the boardroom for our meetings, we had a grower that produced all the rice that he could get planted that year, was actually able to get some additional planting in due to some judicious use of groundwater. So it was very significant from a regional disparity perspective. We learned about the impact on farmers and the impact on infrastructure, which I'll talk about. We learned about the impact on our communities. And we also learned about the impact on species, which actually is supported by rice infrastructure, and we'll talk about that. So I have really 4 lessons learned that I thought might help guide you as you think about this program. The first is a big policy observation, and that's that crops that had crop insurance, the growers were okay, right? If you were that grower that I talked about and didn't plant rice, he had preventive planting crop insurance for his rice. He also had crop insurance for his almond crop. So that farmer was fine, right? Same with many other crops. However, there is no program that covers infrastructure, right? There's no USDA crop insurance for the crop duster, for the trucker, right? For the ag chem supplier, for the truck driver. There's just no insurance, right? So they were stuck. And that was a significant and an immediate difference that we saw. Grower was able to anticipate the crop insurance payment that they were able to receive, able to retain a certain number of their key employees, right? Able to implement some infrastructure projects that they might not have been able to get to, primarily to keep folks in the community employed. But if you were the crop duster, you laid folks off. You put planes in the hangar, and you sent your one son, right? If you're Richter Aviation, you sent your one son to go fly the corn crop in the Midwest, hoping that there would be enough revenue in that to keep his family whole for the year, while you stayed home and didn't collect anything from the business, right? If you were a truck driver, you parked your trucks. If you were a rice dryer, you just shut facilities. You laid every everybody off, right? Employees that maybe had worked there, in some cases, as long as some of our third generation rice drying operators had been alive, right? You're laying off an employee that had been around longer. You remembered as a little kid. So it made an epic difference, and we'll talk about timing in a minute, but as bad as it was last year in rice farmers were all right. The infrastructure, however, was really, really impacted. The other thing that we learned is that timing matters. Even when help is available, like the California Small Ag Business Drought Relief Grant Program, timing matters. You've got to get it out there. We're still working through the grant process to get dollars that were allocated in last year's budget, $75 million. Thank you, Madam Secretary. We have yet to see an application on the street. So frustrating, certainly. Let's set that aside for a minute. The reality of the situation is those businesses that were impacted are still waiting a year later after the drought. So infrastructure timing matters, right? Especially if you don't have that crop insurance. We also fairly immediately heard that infrastructure, as we were thinking about it, clearly translated to our workforce. Well, you know, we would go and we'd say we have these employees that aren't going to have jobs, and well, there's unemployment. Well, if you've ever really looked hard at unemployment or had to use that safety net on your own, you know that really doesn't keep everything together, right? That's a stopgap. You go hopefully find another job. Perhaps you leave the area, right, and go find a job in some other industry. And in the case of the Sacramento Valley, that what we saw is that the infrastructure really translated to the other services that employees used. We asked the folks in our workforce community and the Latino community in the Sacramento Valley, well, this drought is coming. There will not be jobs in rice. What should we know? First thing they said is the schools are going to be just inundated because we'll have employees moving from, right, Colusa County, Glenn County to try to find jobs in the fresh fruit industry over our rice jobs over on the east side of the valley. And what were the schools going to do, right? What about the counseling for the kids whose parents either had to move or, you know, times, of course, were economically very, very difficult. So outside that immediate drought area, but that infrastructure was important. And social services as a whole, right? Yuba County really had to gear up for an influx of workers, of folks that needed help, right? And in the most desperate time, you don't have a job, and those allied sort of neighboring communities were hugely impacted. So that infrastructure, that social infrastructure, not just housing, not just, you know, providing food with folks with unemployment, but really those other services that they need. And finally, I would just note that infrastructure for habitat was hugely important. Here, it worked differently. We know, right, that 230 species of wildlife use rice fields throughout the year. If you don't grow rice, that habitat is not available. Importantly, we provide about 60% of the food for the ducks and geese that come down the Pacific Flyway, stay in the Sacramento Valley. They eat the leftover rice, right, the weed seeds, they eat the insects that are in the field. Well, now not only did we not grow rice and provide habitat for giant garter snake, right, which can't slither far enough to get to the next rice field, but we could, and we didn't grow rice for the habitat for the Pacific Flyway, but we were able, working with Department of Water Resources, to target that need early and through a grant program through DWR, take that same infrastructure that we use to grow rice, right? Those ditches, those canals, those fields, reflood those fields with groundwater, again, used very judiciously, and provide habitat for shorebirds for the Pacific Flyway, and make sure that when those birds came down, right, they didn't get the memo, there was no water in the Sacramento Valley, and we were having a drought, that they had a place to come and to stay, and then be able to go ahead and continue their migration to other areas. So all I would say is that on the infrastructure side, you know, we had what we called a drought with our farmers last year in 2022. You couldn't plant a crop. But the reality is if you're a rice dryer right now, you're still in a drought. We're going to grow 500,000 or so acres of rice this year. But the rice dryer still has to wait, what? For all that rice to be harvested so that it can be dried and then shipped throughout next year. Crop Duster was able to go ahead and plant rice seed in May, but if you're the trucking company, you didn't get any rice last year. You got no rice in the dryer. Now you'll wait until this year's harvest, which also, by the way, is going to be impacted by the late planting of tomatoes. So we didn't have enough truckers to begin with, but now we're going to have to compete with the trucks to haul our grain out of the field while, yes, they're still starting tomato harvest in the Sacramento Valley. So that infrastructure is critical. I would say it is grossly under-supported, right? We think farmers drought, we think farmers infrastructure. We need to think about the small businesses, whether it's the person that supplies parts, spray services, the one plain crop duster, or a big crop dusting company has maybe, 3 or 4 planes, not much more than that. The dryers, which are all small and family owned, right? That infrastructure is critical, even to production agriculture. And we're talking about 500,000 acres of one crop. So I hope that perspective provides some information as you think about infrastructure and resiliency. There really does need to be some type of a safety net, and it needs to trigger as quickly, right, as crop insurance for farmers. And there is an effort in Washington, D.C. that a number of crops that were impacted last year trying to start that discussion. In fact, it's a very well-recepted discussion, whether it's in the Farm Bill or it's outside the Farm Bill, of some mechanism so that when we have a drought, we have businesses to come back to that will support our farm, whether you're growing 350 acres of rice or you're growing 3,000 acres of rice. You still need the plane, you still need the truck, you still need the dryer. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate all the presentations on this panel. Just brings to light the need we have in California. We're being whipped from one extreme to the other, and it shows the economic effects that take place. So we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Joy?
Great presentations. But it feels to me that the definition of infrastructure is being broadened very greatly and significantly and very importantly. I guess I'm addressing that really to Tim. For social infrastructure, environmental infrastructure.
Yes, I think that we realized pretty quickly in last year's discussions that it wasn't just, like I say, the farmer. It was all of the things that are connected to farmers. You say, a trucking company or a aircraft, a crop dusting company. Yeah, that's infrastructure, we get that. But when you start looking at that next levels of impacts, and, great, we've got workers, and of course we know that they need, replacement income, et cetera. But when you talk to the folks in Yuba County and you realize that their infrastructure is impacted too, and they were very desirous to make sure that they both understood, were able to prepare, and also had resources, right, to be able to support that farm worker. For us, and I don't think there's a farmer in this room that wouldn't say the single most important thing to their operation is are the workforce, right? Again, many of which you've been working alongside with for 30 or 40 years. When you got to the point of rice fields as habitat, that infrastructure simply would not exist if you weren't farming a crop, right? That's the first thing you do, and the second thing you do is to provide that habitat. And the good news there is we were able to kind of do it differently, right? It was a different system. DWR really came through, and what did they do? They provided a grant to the Rice Commission. We worked with our conservation partners. We figured out where those acres should be flooded. And we did it. By we, I mean the Rice Commission, right? That partner that we talked about in your previous presentation was able to get those dollars out on the ground with growers that could provide that habitat. So yes, I would say we have realized coming out of this last drought that the infrastructure actually is quite broad. It's quite diverse, but it also hurts, right, when things aren't going well, or can be benefited when things go positively.
Yes, but my question is, does this USDA program address that level of definition of infrastructure?
I would add that, yeah, I think one of the things that we found in agriculture, which brought us to this problem, is that we allowed ourselves to become highly specialized and complex, to our credit, right? Until you have to pivot, until you have to know how to handle a bulk supply as opposed to a single serving. Or can we cross-train? And I think that's the exciting part of this. There was a lot of training, and I bring up that, you know, when you start going to a bulk, if you go from a single serving, if I go to a bulk serving, that's a retraining of food safety. That's that's almost a reformulation of recipes to make it taste the same. And it's the same with workers. You know, I remember in '93, we made a name for ourselves because we would take our olives fresh picked to a press in Sonoma County, and they would, all the other processors or the growers would be there, and they would see, and the processors who were buying say, how come your olives are so clean compared to everyone else? Is because my workers had generations of picking olives, and they would be just as lost at that time in a grape vineyard as a grape vineyard is, harvester is in picking olives. And so how do we can do that cross-training, and whether, I think that's the hope, is that we give people more opportunities to participate, both in the labor market, but also too, that's that quick pivoting as we need to in agriculture for these special events that happen. And I think that's what encourages me too, is there's a lot of training in there. And your first speaker talked about having those forums, those webinars around state, which will be vitally important, because there's a lot of farmers out there who want to take the next step, but they know they have a lot of learning to do, and that's where our UC Extension comes in and everything. So I hear your question, but I think this is that opportunity.
If I could just add, Joy, I think it's a really important question, and it's a good observation. And I think that this is about adding an appropriate level of redundancy into our system so that we're capable of being resilient, of being able to make the pivot. And the infrastructure is writ large. And while this may not address every aspect that Tim brought up, we will face a very similar position depending on how the continued negotiations go beyond 2026 for the Colorado River, where Imperial County is a county that is extremely dependent on one industry, which is the ag industry. And so where are the ways that other added value can be brought in? What are other ways of adding another way of bringing economic opportunities to that area that may still be driven by agriculture, which is what the Future of Food Initiative is working on for the Central Valley. This is a chance to think very holistically about the system and to really engage in helping others understand agriculture, the process every year of planting and harvesting and doing it over and over again is a renewable resource, and that it does create those opportunities. And so we want to make sure that we're adding diversity into our system to have that ability to pivot and be resilient. This grant may not be the answer to everything, but I think it adds a really important step in the right direction. But I think it's a really important discussion for all of us to be engaged in.
I just want to emphasize that I think a lot of people will look at the word infrastructure and
Yes,
not
and think of
grasp
hard
a larger
engineering.
meaning.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And what we have is a whole ecosystem that makes ag work. And you know this in wine. In wine, we have a whole ecosystem of all the inputs and outputs that now are located around this critical mass of wineries. We have the same thing in dairy. What some of the dairy families have learned, taking the next generation of their dairy operations to different states, we have the veterinarians, we have the nutritionists, we have the feed, we have the processing, we have people that know how to continually improve the efficiency of what they're doing. We have the best genetics specialists in the world, quite frankly, here. So it's that ecosystem that supports that part of ag.
And the heightened significance of what a food hub
Yeah.
is. And so that's why I feel really strongly that if we can get a USDA recognition of what a food hub is,
Sure.
that could be extremely helpful in grants.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to compliment Louisa because I've had the honor of meeting with the Yurok tribe almost every year, even during COVID, and to hear their desire of what they want to do on food sovereignty, and to hear the capacity that's being built in your tribe. I think that's going to be very meaningful for other tribes to learn from you who may not have the same level of capacity, but it's exciting to hear the steps that have been taken already, and we're looking forward to working with you and your tribe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're looking forward to it too. Like I said, lots of work to do.
Together.
Chris, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Don. I think I will route this to Jamie. Following up with what the secretary identified, that the grant is what it is. It will hopefully make an improvement, will shed light, and hopefully breed new opportunity, but it also has its limits, one of which is just dollar amounts, for example. And previous presenter identified a perspective that it's seed and intent, and hopefully it encourages or elucidates new opportunities to make a more resilient food system, California and elsewhere. The question I have relating to that comment is, in addition to or understanding that there are limits with what is a very this educated process that the state is going to go through in this Southwest region, do you see or have you seen any additional opportunity when thinking about the intent of the grant program, kind of resiliency within the food system at various scales, various commodities, various farmer sizes, various infrastructure, as Tim had identified, where policies, regardless of the event that causes an impact, 9/11 you raised, COVID-19, whatever it is that shook up the world as we once knew it and tomorrow looks different, that there are policies that have been in place kind of throughout that will still or have still served as impediments that maybe either slow our speed to making a better or more resilient, more hospitable food system? And if so, and I believe that might be true in some cases, clearly not all, what recommendations representing your stakeholders might you have for us at an advisory body to kind of think through as we continue to get updates about not only this program, but how it's working and tracking its progress, where we are able to make recommendations to the secretary and ultimately to the governor. I would like to know as a member, if we're to give helpful input, what policies looking at the state environment might be an imperative that could slow, if not inhibit, our ability collectively to create a more resilient food system? And what would that look like from your perspective?
Certainly with anything, and there's always impediments, and every business, especially a small business owner, knows that to take the next step, there's going to be additional challenges and more bigger infrastructure. But it's something we do need to think about, so thank you for bringing it up as we bring up infrastructure. As right now, I do not process olives. I have someone do it for me, custom do it. I bring them the olives, I bring it back, and then I bottle and label. I do not do that. First of all, because it's a lot of money to market. Marketing takes a lot of money. So does processing. Takes a lot of money. And not just the equipment, but to handle the waste, right? How do we handle the water quality issues? How do we handle, as you become a processor, kind of manage the waste, fertilizer, and what do I do with the olive pumice, right? Those are all real questions that they're gonna run up against. And a lot of it won't even be at the state level. A lot of it happens at the county level too, so that coordination could also happen. Counties have to be committed as well, but right now, at the state level, it is how do we handle that waste? How do we move it? Going further is that, it is a lot of money to deliver a few cases of olive oil to a store in Sacramento from Oroville. It almost doesn't pay. You're almost there just because maybe it drives your online sales. But maybe I wanted to scale up and buy a bigger truck. Maybe I wanted to bring down some mandarins from my neighbor who are selling it fresh to the same store. But we do have truck rules that are coming into place. And what's the investment can we make? We're gonna have to have different trucks, right? You're going to have zero emission trucks for those deliveries. So as we are building this out, there are policies, there are things down the road that we can see that are going to be extreme challenges, and it will be a bigger challenge for the smaller than medium size. But those are all things that as we move forward can be addressed and should be addressed. But those challenges certainly are out there, Chris, and I appreciate that question. that there are policies that run up. I recently testified in a joint hearing of the Senate, State Senate and Assembly on the competitiveness of California. Won't go into that, but certainly some of those policies are running into conflicting with what we ultimately want to do with a resilient food system. So I appreciate the opportunity in the future to start addressing that even more. But I think for now, this is it's a great opportunity, but we shouldn't lose that there's going to be challenges.
Yeah, go ahead, Bryce.
Thank you for the presentations. It does bring a whole new light on what the needed infrastructure. Certainly, every crop has a community of infrastructure that's needed. Tim, I was wondering if you could comment, the funding for drought-impacted businesses is fabulous, but so far those funds haven't made it to impacted businesses. Is it ready to start? Was it tax return driven, or is it close to starting? I guess I just wasn't aware that. I thought it was, everybody had to have a tax return in order to access.
Sure, great question, right? I get asked that a lot from people who are kind of waiting. I think actually the process was impacted by COVID, right? So the process to get grant dollars out and to be able to put all the pieces in place is different post-COVID, right? There was a lot of dollars that went out during COVID. There was some, I think, reasonable criticism that there were not enough checks and balances in that regard, so now we have them all. And as we work through those checks and balances, application process has been delayed now, and we expect it to occur in July. My point's not to criticize what is. My point is just that, when we start talking about getting dollars out to impacted industries, whether you're trying to stimulate additional things that they might need, right? Trucks or additional opportunities that they might want to pursue, or maybe some disaster relief. Small businesses don't hang around forever and just wait for government to be government. I was glad to hear that the previous program's on a rocket sled, right? It's going as fast as it possibly can. I would argue that when you start then having discussions about years, it's not real fast, because the business climate is going to change, right? And so think about that from the perspective of the person who may be the recipient of the grant. That was really my point. But yes, Bryce, the challenge with the grant is that, right, when government's there, it just moves slower than you would hope. And in this case, quite frankly, slower than we needed to have happen.
Do you know, did we lose infrastructure due to the drought, or have many bridges?
Great question. I asked myself that a lot.
The one that I heard about was that there were farmers in Colusa and Yolo waiting 3 days for seed sat on ag strips for 2-3 days. Sometimes it rotted, waiting for crop dusters to be able to fly it on. And it could have just been the crunch due to a compacted planting season due to the rains, but was it also
heard we've lost some
availability?
dryers. I know that we have lost at least one crop dusting business. And certainly from a seed perspective, which is, kind of a weird little thing you never think about infrastructure-wise, is what happens if you have a drought and can't grow enough seed for next year's crop? Well, that's a big deal. Let me tell you what, that's like, oh, we've got this water, we can plant, we've got good weather, we've got a plane all lined up to seed our field, but we don't have the varieties that we want to plant. So I know that we lost almost half of our seed production this last year. Hopefully that will come back next year. But a lot of the smaller, right, businesses couldn't weather, right? The diversity that you're talking about, the expansion of opportunities, right? Those are the first to go, right? Because they don't have the capital. They can't get the business loan, right? They can't lean on their suppliers who are also struggling, right? Because, I can't do this. Well, I can't extend you any more credit, or I can't continue to be patient for payment. I've got I've got to collect. And so, you know, those small and medium-sized businesses are, in my opinion, as we've seen through this last drought, you know, among the most vulnerable, right? So as you think about this grant program and other programs to support those businesses, you know, those are the folks that they're hanging on the ragged edge, right? That one crop makes a difference, right? That one variety of rice that you can't plant because there are no M206 seeds, because we didn't grow any last year because of the drought. That's a big deal, right? You got to plant a longer season variety, and now you're harvesting in November and hoping what? It doesn't rain because you want to be able to harvest.
Just a side question. This morning I was irrigating, and it was cool this morning. There was a giant garter snake on the road, and I stopped, and it was about 3 foot long. And in our, you know, I was one of the lucky farmers on the east side, and so we still see all the snakes and that environmental infrastructure. But on the west side, where there was no water, are there any snakes? Have growers been saying, well, they were able to dig deep and hang in there and come out later, or any early indications?
I know USGS is out doing surveys right now. They're out trapping snakes to see how they fared through this last year's drought. I think it would be remarkable if we didn't have a significant impact on giant garter snake, as quite frankly, a listed species, right? Just because of the complete lack of habitat in the western Sacramento Valley last year. And so that infrastructure, right, that farm infrastructure, that ditch full of water in the case of a giant garter snake, that field where they can go out and bask and track prey, you know, that infrastructure, 1 year, I expect, Bryce, that in the next 2-3 years, as we get that research back and those trapping results back, is just going to show that that's, again, to the earlier comment from Ms. Sterling, you know, infrastructure is a lot more than we just sometimes think about. And I expect the giant garter snake failure, frankly, this last year is going to be writ large. And we will hopefully have better policies moving forward that recognize that infrastructure that's connected to a farm is a deep web. And it's hugely important for the least, right? The small little business in Colusa, and the 3-foot-long garter snake that, you know, hangs out in Don Bransford's field.
Janae, you're up.
Great, and I think I was told I was the last question for the board, so I'll just make it one question. And so I want to thank you, Jamie, Louisa, and Tim, for your presentations. As we think through building healthy and local communities, and also reconciling that climate change is going to be forcing us to really rethink through the definition of community. I want to echo Joy's point on understanding the food hubs, and thank Tim for his reminder about the upstream inputs. But my question is really to Louisa, because your community is bound to a set map geographic community. And as you're thinking through adaptability to climate change, building in the resiliency for your communities, do you have advice for this board about how we might think about these infrastructure grants and allowing the flexibility for you all to innovate in the future?
Yeah, I think those key points that I made earlier about the match requirement, the just the availability of the funds and how tribes access those is really important. I think infrastructure to us in the Yurok tribe means having, I don't think I would call it a food hub, but having facilities on the reservation where we can process food, where we can teach traditional food methodology and processing, as well as the conventional garden and orchard food. I think that's what infrastructure would mean to us, you know, building construction costs for buildings. And two, I would implore folks to think about what agriculture means to tribes. The Yurok tribe isn't necessarily an agrarian people. we subsist mostly on a diet of salmon from the Klamath River and food resources from our mountainous forested area. But in thinking about what agriculture really is, you know, it's a kind of a manipulation of a crop to a certain end, right? And the way that we manage our forests with traditional land use practices, cultural fire being one of those things, is really a way that we can build resilience from climate change and the risks of climate change in terms of catastrophic wildfire, is sort of a rethinking of what agriculture is, and what that might mean to tribes in our traditional land management practices, and potentially supporting the use of our traditional land management practices in grant making, allowing for kind of the redefinition of what agriculture is, I think is important.
Yeah, very good. Would you like to go online and see if we have any questions? Josh?
Yes, if you'd like to make comments on this agenda item, please use your hand icon and I can unmute your line. I'm seeing no public comment at this time.
Well, I'd like to thank all of you for your presentations today. Really excellent. Good to have your input on this, Louisa, Tim, and Jamie. And hopefully we'll see all of you back again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, we are going to take our break. Or do you want, sorry.
No, I'm hungry.
Would you like to do your
No,
update?
I'm fine waiting.
Okay, when we come back, Secretary Ross will do the departmental update, I promise.